Hi, and welcome to What Kind. And for those of you who've been watching before, I'm Lou, and I am a culture and relationships coach. Um, I am coming from our topic today of what kind of future does yours look like, and very much from a coaching angle, and the idea that any work any work that we do within our relationships, whether that's professional or personal, that all starts with you. And so yeah, I've got some amazing people, as always, joining me, although we're missing a regular face. So Neve has been whisked away on a romantic break, and so we're really excited that she's having some good quality time away. And so instead we have George from Quickfire Digital.
Thank you.
Who has been with us from the very, very beginning in the background and was there when we first started talking about it. So I'm so pleased that George is back to join us for this episode.
Oh, thank you, Lou. It's a real nice introduction. So my name's George. I'm the account manager at Quickfire Digital. And I've been there. I started at the start of the year, so a bit of a funny time. So I started right at the start of the pandemic. So I'm going to be coming at today's session with what my future looks like as an employee of a small company, and personally and professionally. So hopefully I'll be able to give you an angle of what it's like from my seat, so the opposite of Lou.
Amazing, thank you. And as always, we have the beautiful Marie joining us from the Trend Academy. Hey Marie.
Hey Lou, hey George, lovely to be today, George. Thank you, Lou. That was such a lovely welcoming. I'm Marie Oakes, and I help creatives excel without burning out, and I'm a speaker and a resilience expert. Today we're going to be talking about what does your future look like. I think so many of us have been through so many different challenges and experience, whether we've been furloughed, whether we've been working, going back to work, or whether we're working from home. And I think, so much change has happened within that time, and we've all got so many different emotions that we've been dealing with. How do you move forward with that? I think sometimes we can too easily think, what does the future look like? But for some of us, just maybe making it through or getting through the next 3 to 6 months is much more crucial. And have a bit more of a clarity, a bit more of a focus of how we do that before we can actually think about what that future looks like. So really going to be talking about kind of how we can help ourselves in the next few months, how we, if we are feeling burnt out, how do we, regain that control back, and stop, from damaging from happening any further. And, if we've got any anxieties or any stresses or how we feel, then, let's talk about them. And, I'll definitely be sharing some stories of how I've felt in the past of feeling like I've got so much work to do, but I feel like I need a 2-week break on a health farm. But what do you do if you can't do that? If you can't get away, what can you do? So we're going to be talking about that and looking at some different tools and skills that you can use. And I know, Lou, you're going to touch on sort of more coaching techniques of helping you sort of individually through those tough times, which we're kind of in at the moment. So
yeah. And there's a part of me, Marie, that in our catch up, so just a peek behind the scenes, we kind of do a quick catch up before we jump on this call. And I was saying to Marie, you know what, I'm at that stage at the moment where I'm kind of going, I don't even know what I'm going to do tomorrow or how I can get out of bed. And so, yeah, sometimes just the idea of trying to work out, like, that dreaded interview question of where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't even know if I can make it to the weekend. And so, yeah, I think there's more of us kind of being able to have those conversations, because I don't think our conversations are in big open spaces at the moment. But I also don't think that we're as comfortable yet to be able to normalize and to be able to verbalize and communicate some of these really big complex emotions that we're experiencing. And so, yeah, I think, as our guest panelist today, I might just pick on George. And, how are you doing?
I'm well. Like, I think for a lot of people, lockdown's been super tough, and it's been super tough for myself, mentally, being in Norwich where all my family and friends are in London. So it's been tough. I went back to work at the beginning of August part-time. So it was welcome, but it was also a bit of a shock to the system, albeit, it was only 2 days a week, but I kind of felt back and I felt like super isolated. I kind of felt like, I didn't really know what my job was. My role had changed, and it threw up a whole like new bunch of challenges. And I think I maybe underestimated it. I think there's a naive part of me that thought I was going to go back to work and it was just going to be normal and it was just going to go back to how it was when I started my job at the beginning of the year. So I think there's part of me that underestimated it. But it's been a bit of a like, it was a bit of a struggle getting back into it because part of it's like, what am I actually doing it? Like, what's my role like turned into now? So it's been nice to go back, but it's also been like a real challenge. Challenge. Yeah.
I suppose it's trying to find your feet again, isn't it? In that sense where, things aren't normal, are they?
No.
I think sometimes you have to take a step back and register that in your head.
And I mean, I started at Quickfire in February, at the end of February. So I started maybe 6 weeks before the whole lockdown thing. So I was in a new job right at the beginning of the year, and 6 months later, I still feel like I'm in a new job, or I've gone back to start a new job. Whereas had things been normal, it would have been, I would have had my feet under the desk right now. I would have been, I would have had a real clear understanding of what I'm supposed to be doing. But then I moved jobs to learn a new job, and I come back in 6 months' time to the same job, but all of a sudden that's changed. So it's like, what? It's been a real challenge.
Mm. And I remember meeting you actually for the first time, George. I think we were at Norfolk Network event, and you just started at Quickfire Digital, and you were like, yeah, it's so exciting. Best ever. And then obviously we couldn't foresee what was going to happen, and I imagine that must be maybe your life had been put on hold in a sense.
I just feel like it's been a year of standstill. I've not been able to progress professionally. I came into the job and I joined right. I came right in the cutoff of the furlough scheme. So there was part of me that was always worried that I could get made redundant any minute because I was the first or the last one in. So for me to be made redundant would have been so easy. I've got no real relationship with anyone at the company. I've not built those friendships or whatever. So it would have been like, oh, he's been here 6 weeks. No one's gonna miss him, or he's not gonna miss us, whatever. So there's a lot of time worrying about what I'm going to do as well. So I said, it's been a year of professionals standstill. Personally, it's been a step back. Mentally it feels like it's been a step back, but it's just new challenges that we're going to have to kind of work towards and overcome. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you being so honest and sharing with us, George. I think firstly, it's incredibly brave to be able to name it, and I think that is something that a lot of us struggle with, is being able to just call it out and say, do you know what, I'm uncomfortable and there's a lot going on and I'm struggling to make sense of it all, and that comes to you at whatever time. And I think there'll be the people watching would really empathize, even if their situation wasn't the same. I know last episode we talked about change and what does that look like, and when it feels like it's out of your control, it's really easy to spiral. And you kind of get cocooned in it almost. So you stop talking, and it's a really vicious cycle. And for those of you who have seen the preview, it's a really big thing for me and Marie, and for Neve, who's usually here when she's not away on a romantic trip. And we talked a lot about in the very beginning, George, that that space to be open and honest about what we're going through can be really tough. And so like I
said before, the sooner you acknowledge it and start talking about it, there's so many people who feel the same way about it. So it's quite hard to face, and they're quite difficult conversations. It's so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable to tell someone how you're feeling. And I found that when I told a few friends about it, and they're like, oh really, is that genuinely how you're feeling? I'm like, yeah, it's been really hard. I've been going through some stuff. And they're like, oh, I honestly would have had no idea. And they're like, but I've been kind of feeling the same way too. And it's only once you start having these difficult conversations, you soon realize that there's actually so many people who have the same feelings, but they just don't want to address it for whatever reason.
I think sometimes it's having that time, isn't it, to step back as well. I think
Yeah.
sometimes we can get so busy and we get caught up, and it's work commitments, and you don't actually
Have time to address it.
Time to address it or sit back and, like we were saying earlier before we jumped on here, you know, when someone says to you, how are you doing, your kind of immediate response is, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And you know,
you move it on, don't you? Move the conversation
yeah.
on. You just kind of like brush past it, and then you get into whatever you're going to be talking about, or whether it's business or whatever. Yeah,
that's either because, you know, you haven't got time to talk about it, or you don't want to talk about it, you don't want people to know. There's that kind of shame, I think, sometimes, and that feeling that, you know, you want people to think that you're okay and that you've got your stuff together.
Got it together. Yeah.
Together, and you know, and actually, I think the more that people come out and say, no, I haven't actually, you know, I'm really worried about this, I'm really worried about that, is just so empowering for everybody. I mean, that was something I really did. I really struggled to start with lockdown, because suddenly all my work disappeared, and, you know, and just didn't know what the future looked like, and actually, I started reaching out to people, and a friend sort of advised me to do it and said, why don't you just, you know, if you're feeling like that, you know, I'm sure there's other people feeling like that, reach out to people that you know. And I did that. And actually that was when, like you were saying, George, when you're that first person to go, do you know what, you know, this is a bit rubbish, I hate it, or I'm really struggling, or I can't deal with this, so many people will go, do you know what, actually, I'm glad I did that, because I feel like that as well. And I you know, it's not hiding from that. And I think it starts with two things. I think it starts with kind of having that awareness and taking that step back. But then, like you talk a lot about, Lou, is pinpointing and identifying what those emotions are. Because sometimes you just have to sit with those emotions and learn to sit with those emotions. And that's quite hard to do in itself. It's quite hard. You know, a lot of people, you know, are stressed and anxious, and they will turn to drink and drugs, and, you know, to numb it, so they you don't have to deal with those insecurities or those anxious times, you know, and they don't have to just deal with it. And I think sometimes the hardest thing is going, do you know what, I need to deal with it. And I think I need to speak about it. Something's not quite right, I'm not dealing with it properly. And I think that takes a really courageous place to be. And then taking that step forward and going, right, well, what can I do about it? I recognise how I'm feeling, or think I recognise how I'm feeling. What can I do about that? And I think there's probably a lot of people maybe are at that point. And, you know, how do you move forward from that? How do you try and make it okay for yourself? And, you know, so Lou, I don't know if you want to kick us off, because I know you're going your coaching mode of kind of how you would start to maybe think about doing that.
I think where we would start, we've kind of touched on already, and it's things that both feels intuitive and counterintuitive. And so one of the things that you said is the vices that we fall back on, Marie. And I've been quite vocal that I'm a recovering workaholic. So my vice was always to fall back into work, keep busy, head down, keep going, just work through it. And we've shared stories before in previous episodes where we kind of go, all right, well, we've done this for 20 years now, it's not working, like, gotta try something different. And so being able to, so that first step is make time for yourself. And if your vice is anything to do with relying on something or someone else that isn't you, whether that's work, whether that's your family, whether that's commitments, a hobby, or, like you said, drink, food, it then becomes about that and not about you. And you then call it something else. And actually what it is that you are unhappy. Something is wrong. And your body is so good at telling you something is wrong. And we get really good at ignoring them. This headache won't go away, I'll just take some painkillers for it. I'm tired, that's fine, I'll just have more coffee. It's like your body is telling you you're tired because you're tired and you need to rest and you need to stop. Oh no, that's okay, like I'm just really busy, I'll just grab a packet of crisps for lunch. All of this stuff, I've definitely gone through in the last 3 months, if not for most of my adult working life. We get really good at ignoring the things that our body is trying to tell us that we're good for. And what we do is we become really scared of the things that we say to ourselves. The whole, So George, just to use your example, like I was the last one in. Naturally, I'll be the first one out. Like those types of voices that come out, and when we separate them out into a different space, you kind of go, oh, that's not my voice. That's someone else. That's someone that's lived in my brain somewhere. And so, at least for my coaching practice, we do a lot around working out whose voice it is that you can hear in your head. And I know that some people get really nervous, because it's one thing that I talk about anxiety and depression. It's another thing when I start talking about the voices in your head. I'm not talking about schizophrenia. I'm not talking about multiple personality disorders. I am talking about the internal dialogue. And that's kind of where what kind podcast came from, was, you know, we have so many conversations in our head, and actually being in a physical bubble without our usual distractions, like you were describing, George, means that they turn into echo chambers. And so get that out of you. It's like an emotional exorcism. Like, just right, the stuff that's going on, even if you're not talking to anyone else other than, you know, your pet or the mirror or this weird cartoon that you've drawn, like, just get it out of you, name it. So, you know, I do this, I say it's a fun thing. I do a helpful thing with clients where we name the gremlins, and, you know, we give them a personality, we give them a persona, we give them characteristics. And usually what happens is that the more we try and work with this externalized voice, the more we can actually have grown-up conversations with them. And I think when you're trying to climb out of that pit, like before you even start looking at what kind of future you have, that's why working on yourself becomes so important. Because if you're not able to be honest with yourself, you don't know how to ask for help, you don't know who you can talk to. And so, yeah, I'm in danger of derailing this conversation all over again, which I do every episode, so you're all used to it by now.
I think that's all really true, Lou. I think that's brilliant, because I think it is what we tell ourselves, and I think that then becomes quite irrational almost. And I think the big thing that we've talked about before as well is that control aspect of controlling the controllables. You know, we don't necessarily have that control whether we're going to get fired or whether we're going to lose our job, or you know, and I think that can just start going round and round and round in our head, and we worry about it. And it's almost, you know, it's almost like we can't afford to worry about it. We can't afford to kind of pass that energy somewhere else, because we just don't know what's going to happen. So how do we, I think it's a really hard place to be, is to have that balance, to take care of yourself and be okay, but not worry at the same time. I think that's really, really hard. And I remember coming back, I've talked about this before, and I came back from New Zealand, and I got made, you know, I had no job, I was broke and needed to go out and work, and, you know, my marriage was in trouble and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, and all I could do really at that time was, I didn't have any control really whether I was going to walk into an interview and someone was going to give me that job. All I could really control was what I needed to do to get myself to that interview. You know, did I need to wash my hair or get out of bed, have my breakfast, all the basic stuff that I could control. And I think I always say this to clients as well, is, you know, what are those, really strip it back to those basics as well, as what are those 3 most important things that I need to do that I can control. And anything that I can do to get me closer to my goal, what is it that I can do? And all the other stuff, and it's really hard, because they say don't sweat the small stuff, but we do sweat the small stuff.
Hard, isn't it? It's hard not to.
It's really hard not to. But it's really hard, you know, to go and actually just kind of, and it's a way of kind of regaining that control back and going, do you know what, I can't control that. That's out of my control, but what I can do is control this. And that just helps take that overwhelm away. It enormously helped me. But I know it's not easy, and I know it's very hard to do. And I think this goes back more to my own kind of, you know, passion about helping people with, you know, manage their well-being and increase their resilience, because that's where that comes in too, where, you know, the more resilient you are, the better that you look after yourself. If you are going into situations like this, that you do know how to cope, and you do know what's going on inside your head, and you can work out what makes you tick and why you behave the way you do and the emotions that you do. And I think not enough of us do that, and not enough of us do work that out, to spend that time working out on ourselves. And I think what we've seen over the last few months is people have started to do that, or they started to work through that, and they're probably at that stage where they need to take that forward. You know, well, what do I do differently, or how can I do things differently to move forward? So I think the control there is definitely a big thing for me. And another thing I think is learning to say no as well.
Yeah.
This is so powerful. I learned the power of no quite a few years ago, and I never thought that, you know, I had the confidence to do it, you know, especially if you are young and you're starting out, George, you're in a new job, you know, it's like, yes, I can do it.
You just want to make good impressions, don't you? You want to make good impressions, be hardworking, you know, please people, you know, people pleasing, rightly or wrongly, is something you want to do, don't you? And you know, I think a lot of people are guilty of that. I'm certainly guilty of that. And I think that's one of my issues, is that if I say no, like there's like internal battle going on in my head, like it's like the what if game. You know, what if I say no, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in an argument or in some sort of confrontation? And that's, you know, something I'm trying to work on, because it will just get you in like more bother if you just constantly say yes. Like you'll just constantly complying with people, constantly saying yes, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a worse position because you're agreeing to something you don't want to do, but you're agreeing for the sake of whether it's an easier life or whether it's trying to people please, whatever it might be. But you're just agreeing just to avoid any sort of confrontation or to avoid being assertive, and it's not healthy. And that's that's something I'm really trying to work on, because I'm so guilty of always saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
Everything, just to keep people happy.
So one of the things that I've been learning as I'm kind of working with different types of clients is, so I talk, you know, very much what Marie's been talking about. I use the terms power and influence. Power is where it's stuff that is within your control, and anything that isn't within your control you can influence negatively or positively. And for me, whenever I catch myself saying yes, and my other half will laugh when he sees this, because I still say yes to lots of things. The big difference for me now is I kind of imagine like holding a baton. And so whenever I say yes to something, I'm giving the baton to someone else. And like, I can only have so many batons in my backpack because I've kind of run out, and there's, you know, I don't have any more to give. And I'm desperately looking for something because I want to be able to say yes to stuff. And actually what I'm doing is I'm kind of giving away power. I'm giving away without even thinking, in lots of cases, something that is mine. It's a bit of a clumsier metaphor than my usual, but yeah, the idea of like just it by saying yes, especially without any reflection, because it becomes habit. And we've talked a little bit before about just doing the script. Like in your head, one of the voices is like, yes, say yes, make people happy, people will like you more. And then what we're really good at is ignoring that other voice that goes,
why have you done this? Like,
yeah, I already don't have enough hours in the day. Like I don't have, and it works for our personal circumstances as well. I've said yes because I want to see my friends, but actually I can't afford it. Like I'm over budget this month. You know, I don't really want to go out drinking because I don't actually like drinking because I'm old. But I feel like I should. You know, I should. Should is the word that comes up so much when I'm working with clients and for myself as well. And so that kind of calling it and naming it is definitely around spotting the language that you use as well, because they're the clues that you give this stuff away for free, willingly, and you'll try and find more and you have nothing else left to give.
I think that's so true, Lou, and I think that is one of the biggest causes of burnout, is not knowing how to say no, or learning the art of saying no. And I think, you know, I see that quite a lot, especially in younger people, you know, where you do want to impress, and you know what it's like, and your boss says, oh, can you do this, and you kind of go home and think, oh my god, how am I going to fit that in? I don't have enough hours in the day. And people don't teach you how to have those conversations. That you don't. I remember being in situations I didn't realize I could say no. I didn't realize that I could maybe negotiate and say, well, look, does it why does it need to be done by this certain time? Do I have any leeway? Can I get it done for you tomorrow? And maybe just have a different conversation. I think it is learning to have those honest conversations. And another thing is, something I always used to really struggle with, and I think that's kind of, was a result of my burnout, is managing the workload and managing those priorities and setting those boundaries. I never went back to my boss and said, well, look, you've given me these 3 things and you've now given me a 4th. What's the most important thing? Because that will get knocked to next week, or do you want me to work on it, or do you want someone else to work on it, rather than, take it all on yourself. And of course, then you just get complete overwhelm. You have that procrastination. You're like, oh my God, where do I start next? And you can't think. And also, you have that feeling where you haven't stuck up for yourself. And that's the most awful feeling, and you go home, you try and put your head on your pillow at night and you're just like, I haven't stuck up for myself. Come on, you start having a few words with yourself. Come on, you need to do better. And actually, just and even in a personal level, when you start to say no or learn the art of saying no, it's so empowering and it's just so uplifting, and it's not in an arrogant way, and you can do it in a very polite way. You'd say to your friends, look, I'm sorry, I can't make it this evening, but I'm sure you'll have an amazing time and I'll catch up with you next time. And I think just by saying, like you're saying, it's just that breathe, that sigh of relief, that you're not putting pressure on yourself. And I think a lot of that also stems to how much you can handle. I think sometimes it takes it to work it out, but how much can you handle before you're going to tip your bucket over and you're going to kind of fall over. I think that's an art of learning that. And again, it's to recognizing those signs of burnout or working too much or work stress or that anxiety is really, really important.
And so this idea of like changing things up and being honest, like it definitely comes back for me, this idea of stepping away from the script, because I think we have them. We were talking earlier. How are you doing, George? I'm fine. How are you? Marie, what's been going on? Yeah, just been busy. How about you? Yeah. What did you have for lunch today? The usual. We fall into these scripts of it's easy, we don't have to think about it, and we are so tired, we just fall into this like automatic mode. And so one of my inner selves that I work with is Robot Lou, and she is the one who's like, yeah, we're fine, off we go, like there's stuff that needs doing, let's do it. And whenever she is in charge, I know I'm in trouble, because it means the rest of me is just checked out and on autopilot. She is like the last reserve, so if she goes, I'm in trouble. And I think what we don't do is we don't recognize that enough in ourselves. And I think a big part of that is not understanding that we have been living in a threat space before we get to that stage quite a lot. That fear of, I've got to make the right impression, I've got to work hard, how people see me, like, I've got to impress my parents, or whatever story it is that you're living through. And I think that's with the theme that we're talking about, the question that we're looking at today is, what kind of future does yours look like? I think what I'm taking away from this conversation so far is you have been living a story, whether it's yours or not, but you get to claim it. And it's not easy to do that, which is why therapists are amazing, which is why counselors are amazing, which is why coaches are amazing. But in all seriousness, we underestimate how much we talk to ourselves, and we underestimate how much crap we give ourselves. Man, we're hard on ourselves. Yeah. And so some of that, you just need an external point of view. That
it's someone just to tell you, like, it's not as, it's not that deep. It's, it's nothing to worry about. Like, you're just getting carried away. Like someone, to to be able to take the emotion out of it is so beneficial, because you can, someone you don't know, someone who's going to be like, look, what you're going through is normal, but as long as you can acknowledge it and address it, and if you can articulate it, then it's even easier, and it's having someone to help get it out of you. And then it all kind of, it all kind of starts to make sense then, doesn't it? It all kind of seems like, once you can articulate and once someone's pulled it out of you, then you can consciously address it on a day-to-day basis. But until you get to that point, you bury your head in the sand, look for distractions, don't acknowledge it. But once you get to that tipping point and someone starts telling you, like, this is what you're feeling is normal, how does it make you feel? Where does it make you feel in your body? Do you feel it in your throat? Do you feel it in your stomach? And then once you start acknowledging it and addressing it, then you can overcome it. But it's so easy just to find a distraction. And I found I was doing that all through lockdown. I was looking for distractions, not necessarily as bad as drink or drugs, but I would bury my head in the sand over anything, because it was easier than addressing how I feel. Because if I address how I feel, then that's a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's really hard. But once you get to that point, it all kind of starts to make sense, which is great. It makes life a whole lot easier.
Yeah, it does. And I think for you, Lou, like, I know you're a recovering workaholic in a sense, and I suppose I am too in a certain sense. And when I get interviewed, or when I speak to businesses and they say, well, tell me about your story, and did you recognise the burnout signs? Did you recognise that you weren't coping? Like, for you, did you recognise that yourself, or did someone else recognise that for you? Because just going back to with George, George has obviously been able to recognise that himself, but how did that happen for you? What's your story for that?
I think I talked about this in our preview episode, so when I talk about how we get really good at ignoring the signs, that comes from lived experience. I think other people spotted it in me first, and then I ignored them. I told them they were being silly, that I was fine. And so, it took a really long time. So for me personally, I've had a long history with depression. Anxiety for me is relatively new. Social anxiety was even newer, and for an extrovert, that was weird. But yeah, I think I was 12 when I started experiencing migraines. And so again, a physical sign of under a lot of stress. And I know 12-year-olds don't really have a lot to get stressed over, but if you look like I look growing up in Norfolk, where you were 2 English at home and 2 Chinese at school, like, it was quite stressful, and I just didn't manage it properly, and so it kind of escalated. And so I knew something was wrong, but I'd managed to convince myself that I'll fix it, and that I'm completely capable and independent and fierce and all of this other stuff that, women in particularly nowadays are supposed to be. I was never allowed to be vulnerable. I was never allowed to be weak or sensitive. And so the equivalent would be, if I started speaking in Chinese now, you just wouldn't have a clue. And for me, I didn't have that emotional vocabulary to be able to go, I'm hurting. And so it wasn't until things got really, really bad, that I had help put on to me. And it's only as I've gotten older that I've keeping notes of, like, today was a bad day. This is the kind of conversations I've been having in my head. Oh, those conversations put me in a really bad place. Or it's because of these conversations, I'm in a bad place because I'm having these conversations. And so I've spoken before on other podcasts, like, collect your data. For anybody who thinks emotions is too icky, just collect your data. Like, today was a good day, like emoji on the like in your calendar or something. Just to be able to go, okay, and then spot your patterns and spot what works for you. How long did it take you to get out of bed? Like, literally, how long did it take you to get out of bed, from like when your eyes opened to how many times you snoozed, to what time you actually put your device down and wake up and, you know, move away from the duvets. I used to work with students, so that was a reality. And yeah, it just, I'm learning, I'm still learning, which is why I call myself a recovering workaholic, because it is, I think it's always a work in progress. I think whatever outlet we choose to deal with the overwhelm and stress, like, we need it, don't we? We need that break. Like, for people who know me, I'm an absolute like fantasy sci-fi geek, and so, you know, at one point completing Skyrim was my only goal, because I had to check out, and that's okay in small doses, but if you find yourself doing that all the time,
yeah,
that's an issue. Sorry, Marie, again, I don't know if I answered your question. I rambled.
No, you did, and I think that's very true, because I think, you know, I'm probably very lucky or fortunate, should I say, that, you know, I always ask myself the question, you know, was it good that I went through a burnout or not? And I think in a way for me it was, because I am so much more in tune with how I think and my awareness of others as well. You know, I can see, would pick up, and, you know, I can mirror those same symptoms that I see in other people, and can help and offer advice and things like that. And I feel very fortunate to be in that situation where I have the alert signs, and I'm aware of it. But I think a lot of people, you know, and in a way, you know, you know, not talking about doom and gloom in a sense, but in a way, this kind of time, these 5 months will be great. I think good will come out of bad, in the sense where, you know, like George, this will make you such a better person.
Yeah.
This, you know, you've gone through such a mix of emotions, and putting yourself in different situations that you've never found yourself in before, and, you know, you had to think on your feet and think differently, and I think, you know, it will help you build that resilience. And I think a lot of people have kind of realized that they're much stronger than they think, and that they can deal with things much better. And I think sometimes there is that fear in life where we don't throw ourselves out of our comfort zone, because we don't want to test ourselves, and we don't want to challenge ourselves, and it's easy, it's so easy just to stay where we are. And I think, you know, the only way we're going to improve is to push ourselves into progress. And I think maybe what I'm hoping and optimistic will come out of this is people have been tested, and they will be like, you know what, look, I got through this, I can manage this, what else could I do, what else could I go out there and do? And I think a lot of people will have reassessed, you know, why they do what they do, you know, what makes them happy. You know, we very rarely talk about what makes us happy. A lot of us can say, well, look, I don't like doing this doesn't make me happy. But actually sitting down and going, you know, what is it that makes me happy? Am I doing the job that I want to do? Why did I set my business up in the first place? Am I doing everything that I set out to do? And we never get that reset button or that pause, very rarely, because we all do get really busy. So I'm really optimistic. I'm really hopeful that we will all come out of this bigger and better. But I do understand that, you know, the next kind of 3 to 6 months for everybody will be an interesting time, and will be a challenging time. And I suppose what we could talk about next, Lou, then is, you know, how do you get through that? What are the key things to start doing? What would you advise someone to do in you know, going forward? I mean, for me, like, just quickly to add, is keeping focus on the basics. You know, making sure that, you know, it's very easy, you do these small things, it's very easy to, you know, to forget to clean your teeth at night before you go to bed, or you forget to have your breakfast, or you forget to do your skincare regime, or you forget to make your bed. And if you start adding up all these little things, it's just going to be complete overwhelm, and you haven't got that control. And going back to the element of control, where if all of those things in your life are good and manageable, then any other kind of stress that you kind of throw into that, hopefully you can deal with that better.
Yeah, that resilience work that you talk about, Marie, I think is you know, it's such an important part, and I think one of the reasons why so many people have struggled is because of, regardless of your own experience, our sense of resilience has been tested. And so I think I've used this metaphor before, like, we're this rubbery ball that needs to be substantial enough to hold together, but enough, like a squash ball, but that your bounceability, so when you hit the wall you don't lose your shape, but it change, like you don't lose the mass, but your shape changes to reflect the impact of what's hit you. And I think if you have been lucky enough to have quite a stable worldview and a stable environment, then something like a global pandemic is really it is a wall that you've been thrown into that you didn't even know was there. And so I think some of that is acknowledging that we're still in one piece.
Yeah,
we're still the same mass. We might feel a little bit squished, and that's okay. Like, I think part of it, and like you, Marie, it's that optimism that comes with, I'm all right. I'm not like I'm fine, but I've survived.
I'm getting through this.
Yeah. I'm still here.
Yeah.
I'm still here. I'm speaking. I've learned a couple more extra skills. I've learned a few things about myself that I didn't know before. And just, it's a little bit like just checking yourself for minor injuries when you've like fallen off your bike or something. And so I think just being able to give yourself a chance to go, oh yeah, no, I'm here, I'm alive, it's all good. It's not, but I'm all good. I'm here. I have everything I need right now. And I think that was such a huge lesson. So as a recovering workaholic who set up a new business and took on a master's in a space of like 4 weeks last year, I know, George, that
what were you thinking?
Recovering workaholic. And actually the really valuable lesson that I learned then, not like in the 30 odd years before that, but right in that moment, was really understanding that I am my most valuable resource. None of the things that I want in my life can happen if I'm not around. None of these things that I want in my life can happen if I'm not taking care of myself, if I'm not, looking after me. I can't run my business if I'm tired. I can't make good decisions. I will write awfully, probably in like the worst Chinese in the world. I stop being able to speak incoherent sentences. You can tell I'm a bit tired today. Like, none of this stuff that I want to happen can happen if I don't look after myself. And so that's a big reason why, for me, my work comes from let's do the work on you first, because if you don't look after you, you can't do all of this other stuff. And so your future is as optimistic as you are with yourself, really. And all of those conversations that you have with yourself that are awful and that you worry about everyone else judging you, I can tell you now that they're all too busy doing exactly the same thing, worrying about what you're thinking. And like, I think look after yourself, be kind to yourself, and whatever future it is that is right for you, you have the power to make that happen. And anything that is outside of your control, you can influence to some degree.
That all makes sense. And I wrote a question down then when you were talking, Lou, and I was going to ask George this, if I may, that, there's two questions actually, like how will you move forward differently, and what have you learned about yourself?
I think moving forward, I think I just need to be more conscious with what I'm doing and try and be less on autopilot, and try and not always ask what if, always just try and rationalize in my head, and be a bit more conscious and make a little bit more effort, because I feel if I do that, the rest will kind of fall into place. It's because sometimes it is so hard to understand like what your next move is going to be, what you're going to do, where do you see yourself going, like coming out of this like pandemic and things are turning to normal, where do you see yourself going? And as someone who would always jump to the worst case scenario, like with anything, doesn't matter whether it's work or outside of work, it would always be worst case scenario regardless of what I'm thinking. Trying to But actually, no, that's probably not going to happen. Like, just take a step back and try and rationalize it, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to do anything. I'm just going to be constantly like crippled by like this fear of the what if, of the worst case scenario. So that's what I'm trying to work on now, is actually, hang on, like, you know, that's not going to happen. Just take a deep breath, understand what you're saying or what's going on in your head, and actually realize that if you make the small steps, like, you'll get to where you want to be.
I think that's a great answer.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. So there's you've actually probably answered the second question, like, what lessons have you learned about yourself?
Oh, and the, you know, lessons I've learned over this 6 months or 5 months, whatever it is, it's like, it's okay to not feel okay all the time. It's okay to like try and understand how you're feeling. It's not healthy to bury your head in the sand at everything you do, or try and find distractions, because it will get to a breaking point. But people notice these things. Like, you're surrounded by people who care about you and love you, and they pick up on these things. But it needs to come from yourself. You need to address, like, they can't address it for you. You have to address it yourself. So that's the biggest thing I've learned, is actually being able to understand how I'm feeling, because for so long I buried my head in the sand, or I was just on autopilot, and it did me no good. And it got to a breaking point, and it all kind of started to make a little bit more sense. So that's like the biggest takeaway out of this pandemic, which I think is like a fairly big lesson.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's brilliant. That is brilliant. And I suppose, I know you've been through lots of different challenges yourself, Lou, but like, what during this time, I suppose for you, like, what have you learned about yourself?
What have I learned about myself? I think it's about showing up and knowing, and it's reminding myself that, like, I can show up and check out. And so, yeah, very much in our catch up earlier, you know, when you asked me how I was doing, and like, I overcame step number 1. I was able to go, I'm just feeling a bit weird at the moment and tired, and I really needed a nap. So I've done that. And being able to kind of practice what I preach, and actually understanding how hard that is. And so when I say about showing up, and I don't mean, you know, at work at every single opportunity, it's about showing up for myself, that being present with myself. So, you know, Robot Lou, you're really helpful, but not right now. You know, you're great when I need to do my tax returns, but not so much right now, when I'm trying to look after myself and work out what my needs are. And so, yeah, showing up and being able to kind of go, yeah, there's a lot on, there's a lot that I'm worried about. And again, kind of being able to go, that business decision that I'm making, I think that comes from a threat space. Right, let's get into a different space, and then let's look at it. Almost kind of like what George was saying. So you know, what if I say no to this, and what happens? And then being able to spin it around, going, why not? And then being able to, because you've changed the question, I've been able to step out of that script. I can then go, oh yeah, because your master's starts again in a couple of weeks, that's probably a good reason why not. And sometimes it's yeah, why not have that nap, why not have that day off, why not do the thing? And then being able to go, okay, and then how? And yeah, it's that pragmatic optimism, trying to move into that pragmatic optimist space.
Yeah, brilliant. I think for me, just to share is having that space. I think adding that space between maybe when someone asks you something, or to do something, or you're about to make a decision, just kind of take a step back before you say yes, or before you say no, has been really, really helpful. Because again, like, you know, if you're not in that headspace, and you constantly want to please people, and you know, you want to say yes, and you want to move your business on, I think it's more powerful saying yes to the right things. and knowing what those right things are, but knowing that, I mean, I talk about this a lot in the work that I do, where I have this question where I say to myself, right, is this going to harm me or is this going to help me? And I always, before I make a decision, always go, right, is this for the good of my well-being? Am I going to be okay if I do this? Will other people be okay? And that has to be, you know, for me, that has to be like my central place and my foundation of how I make my decisions. And I think it's definitely really, really helped me to move forward. But I mean, it's great. It's great to hear that, you know, there's so much optimism and hope and lessons that you guys have both learned, and how you can kind of move forward. And I think hopefully everybody listening can take some of those away with them today and use them. I don't know if anyone got anything to add.
I just really wanted to emphasize something George said that I think so important, that it's okay that it's hard, that it's okay that you have a crap day, and yeah, being able to kind of recognize that's what it is helps separate it so it becomes a crap day or a crap morning, but that doesn't have to define you or the future that you have. And being able to make space for that optimism, because if you're watching this and you're not, you know, you don't feel like you're on that chapter that we might be talking about later down the line, it doesn't mean that you'll never get there. But yeah, just, it's okay that it is just awful out there right now.
I think it's also, and that's so true, Lou. I think it's also about finding that space and that support as well. That space, you know, sometimes it's very hard to do, like on social media, you know, as we know, people post more about kind of all the amazing stuff that's happened, and no one really kind of posts about all the real stuff that's happening, because we don't want people to know about that stuff. We don't want them to see that business isn't great or we're not great. And I'd love to sort of see more of that. And I think, you know, if you don't feel that you can do that on your business LinkedIn or on your certain social medias, is find a support network, find a space where you've got 2 or 3 of you that are, you know, maybe doing a call like this every week or every month, and you're checking in with each other, and that privacy element is there as well, where, you know, and find someone to talk to that maybe is going through something similar or can help you or has been through it before. You know, mentors are sometimes really good in that respect, because I think talking about it is really, really good. And also finding somebody that's maybe quite neutral. I've always felt, you know, I've talked about this before, and we've talked about this earlier, about everyone should have a therapist. I think therapists are brilliant. It really helps you to kind of work out, you know, who you are and what you're about and what makes you tick and how you can be better. You know, if you can't find a therapist, or, you know, just the same is finding somebody that you can talk to and really honestly say, you know, if someone says, how are you feeling, you can go, do you know what, I'm not feeling that great.
But being able to take the emotion out of it as well is like super beneficial, because they're going to come at it with a totally neutral stance, aren't they? They don't know you, they don't, you know, strictly a professional relationship. You know, you're paying them to listen to your problems, aren't you? But it, you know, when someone can pick it apart without any emotion involved, then it all starts to make sense for yourself as well. So I think that's why it's so important as well, to find that neutral person, because it will help you understand things that maybe a partner or a parent or a friend won't be able to understand, because they know you as a person and maybe would be worried about upsetting you or saying the wrong thing. So it definitely helps to remove that side of it.
Yeah, the investment's different, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're accessing a service like counselling or therapy or coaching or mentoring, like that, not having a prior relationship means that they're not invested in you being a better partner or a better employee. Like, it is about you as your whole person. And so I think the only thing that I'm going to add to that is that if you're hearing this and you're interested but you have no idea where to start, you are more than happy, you're more than welcome to contact us, whether that's on a message on LinkedIn. I say us, I'm signing George up because he's on this podcast. You don't need to contact George, but Neve, Marie and I have a email address, and so I believe a link to that is going to be at the end of this, but if not, it is whatkindpodcast@gmail.com, and so that is a space that if you just want to dump something into, nobody else apart from the three of us sees it. We're not selling anything. It's just if we can put you into contact to get you started on that work on yourself, then we're more than happy to help. Because we know firsthand, I think each of us know firsthand how important that work is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's kind of really why we set it all up in the first place, wasn't it? To have that space and that have those honest conversations and share, you know, everyone's, not just ours, like experiences and woes and things like that. So but yeah, it's been brilliant. But well, thank you both. That's been awesome. And
Thank
hopefully
you for having me on.
Hey, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good. It was really good to get, you know, to actually do something that I was helped start, I guess. Yeah, it was real good.
You made it happen, George.
Yeah, here we are.
The dream team.
Absolutely.
But no, that's brilliant. It was lovely to have you. Thank you, Lou, as always. You've been brilliant. And so next week, just to wrap up, we are going to be talking about what kind of start to a career is this. Obviously, a lot has been happening over the summer with schools and universities and getting your first job, and you know, let us know what those anxieties are, what you're struggling with, what you might need help with, or some success stories. You know, something's happened to you and you want to share that, so please get in touch. We have the what kind email, and we would love to hear from you. So thank you so much for today, and we all look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Marie.
Bye.
Thanks, George. Bye.
Bye.